would like to call the meeting to order and welcome everyone in attendance. The committee has under consideration the estimates of the Ministry of Transportation and Economic Corridors for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2025. I'd ask that we go around the table and have members introduce themselves for the record. Minister, please introduce the officials who are joining you at the table. My name is Garth Rosewall. I'm the MLA from Vermilion Lloydminster Wainwright and chair of this committee. We'll be starting to my right.
MLA Jackie Armstrong Hominick, Fort Saskatchewan, Vegreville.
Nolan Dick for the incredible riding of Grand Prairie.
Grant Hunter, Tabor Warner.
Miles McDougall, Calgary, Fish Creek.
Scott Sinclair, MLA for Lesser Slave Lake.
Minister Devin Dreeshen from Innisfail, Sylvan Lake. Oh, sure, we can do that right now. Bryce Stewart, my deputy minister, right beside me. Dale Fung, the ADM of Financial Services Division. Tom Liu, on my far right, is the ADM of Construction and Maintenance Division, and Ranjit Tharmalingam is the ADM of Capital Planning Grants and Engineering Service Division. And I have more senior officials behind me, if that's okay, Chair. Paul Smith, the ADM for Capital Planning Grants and Engineering Services. Dave Peace, the ADM of Strategic Integrated Services Division. And Lynn Varty, the ADM of Traffic Safety Services Division.
My name is Lauren Dack, MLA for Edmonton McClung and critic for Transportation and Economic Corridors with the official opposition.
Court Ellingson, MLA for the incredibly diverse riding of Calgary Foothills.
Marlon Schmidt, Edmonton Gold Bar. Permit Singh Bopray, Calgary Falcon Ridge.
Warren Huffman, Committee Clerk.
Okay, we have nobody online, so we're good there. A few housekeeping items to address before we turn to the business at hand. Please note that the microphones are operated by Hansard staff. Committee proceedings are live streamed on the internet and broadcast on Alberta Assembly TV. The audio and video streams and transcripts of the meeting can be accessed via the Legislative Assembly website. Please set your cell phones and other devices to silent for the duration of the meeting. Honorable members, the main estimates for the Ministry of Transportation and Economic Corridors shall be considered for 2 hours. Standing Order 59.01 sets out the process for consideration of the main estimates in legislative policy committees. Suborder 59.01 bracket 7 sets out the speaking rotation for this meeting. The speaking rotation chart is available on the committee's internal website, and hard copies have been provided to the ministry officials at the table. For each segment of the meeting, blocks of speaking time will be combined only if both the minister and the member speaking agree. If debate is exhausted prior to 2 hours, the ministry's estimates are deemed to have been considered for the time allotted in main estimate schedule, and the committee will adjourn. Should members have questions regarding speaking times or the rotation, please email a message to committee clerk about the process. Ministry officials who are present at the discretion of the minister address the committee. Ministry officials seated in the gallery, if called upon, have access to a microphone in the gallery area and are asked to please introduce themselves prior to commenting. Pages are available to deliver notes and other materials between the gallery and the table. Attendees in the gallery are not allowed to approach the table. Space permitting, opposition caucus staff may sit at the table to assist their members. However, members have priority to sit at the table at all times. Points of order will be dealt with as they arise, and individual speaking times will be paused. However, the block of speaking time and the overall 2-hour meeting clock will continue to run. Any written materials provided in response to questions raised during the main estimates should be tabled by the minister in the assembly for the benefit of all members. Finally, the committee should have the opportunity to hear from both questions and answers without interruption during the estimates. Debate flows through the chair at all times, including instances when speaking time is shared between a member and the minister. I would now invite the Minister of Transportation and Economic Corridors to begin your opening remarks. You have 10 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, Chair and members of this committee. I'm pleased to present Alberta Transportation and Economic Corridors 24-25 estimates. Budget 24 is a responsible plan for a growing province and it is a plan that maintains Alberta's competitive advantage so businesses and industry continue to thrive, innovate, and create jobs. At Transportation and Economic Corridors, we play a key role in contributing to Alberta's economic, social, and environmental vitality by providing a safe and efficient transportation system. And I'm pleased to share some of the department's accomplishments, including the opening of the Calgary Ring Road to traffic this past December, several months ahead of schedule and on budget. Calgarians now have access to 101 kilometer of free flow travel around the city, which means easier, faster commutes and improved travel for industries that rely on this route. The Edmonton Ring Road, the Southwest Expansion Project, also opened to traffic in late of 23 of last year. The Southwest Anthony Henday Drive was widened from 4 lanes to 6 lanes, which will safely accommodate up to 120,000 vehicles a day, helping to reduce congestion in this high traffic area in the Edmonton region. These are just 2 examples of recent strategic investments we have completed to improve Alberta's economic corridors by providing vital links to markets in and out of the province. Our department's 3-year capital plan is $8.1 billion. Of this, $1.9 billion over 3 years is for capital investments for the planning, design, and construction of major provincial highways and bridge projects. And approximately 75% of this investment is for existing or planned economic corridors. Most highway improvements were identified by industry partners to improve the movement of goods and services. Major projects in the province include nearly $97 million over 3 years to improve safety and reduce congestion on Highway 881 between Lac La Biche and Highway 63, just south of Fort McMurray. We are continuing to invest in enhancing our economic corridors across the province, including $327 million over 3 years to complete projects such as the Highway 320 between Taber and Burdett, Highway 1120 between Sylvan Lake and Rocky Mountain House, and Highway 4020 south of Grand Prairie. We've also allocated $151 million over 3 years for 56 engineering projects. Now, completing these engineering projects provides a well-defined scope of work and then construction bids to proceed in our capital plan. In Calgary, we are investing in major improvements to Alberta's busiest road, the Deerfoot Trail. Budget 24 includes almost $524 million in funding for the project over the next 3 years. Our total capital investment also includes nearly $312 million over 3 years for water management and flood mitigation, including the Springbank Off-Stream Reservoir Project, or more commonly known as SR1. In addition to capital investments in new infrastructure, we are continuing our work to preserve and extend the life of provincial roads and bridges. We are dedicating $30 million in additional funding over 3 years to support the replacement of aging bridges across the province. Replacing these bridges will improve travel for Albertans and industry, helping to support economic development and to create jobs. Budget 24 includes $1.7 billion in capital maintenance and renewal, or CMR, funding over the next 3 years to rehabilitate key highways. This total includes $308 million over 3 years of new funding. This funding supports our extensive network, which is over 64,000 lane kilometers of highway, and we also have about 5,000 bridges and bridge-sized culverts in our provincial network. For highway maintenance, Budget 24 includes $430 million this year, and that is a $28 million increase compared to last year, and is the highest annual maintenance budget compared to the last 5 years. Now, approximately 1/3 of this budget is for winter maintenance activities, including snow and ice control on our highway network. Highway summer maintenance activities include ongoing structural and operational maintenance, such as surface treatments and pothole repairs, right-of-way moving, vegetation control, and highway lighting. In addition to maintaining and improving our highway network, our department's mandate includes supporting municipalities and including critical local infrastructure. The capital plan includes $4.2 billion in capital grants to help municipalities build much-needed local roads, bridges, water, and transit infrastructure. This total includes $212 million over 3 years in new funding. We are increasing our funding commitment to the Strategic Transportation Infrastructure Program, also known as STIP, and Budget 24 invests $111 million in STIP over 3 years, including $30 million of new funding. We know funding through this program is critical to supporting municipalities, and STIP funding always allows smaller and rural municipalities to maintain and improve local roads, bridges, and other key infrastructure. We are also continuing to provide grants to support municipal water supplies. Water is our most precious resource, and this funding helps ensure reliable access to clean drinking water and effective wastewater services to support Albertan industries and agriculture. Budget 24 includes a total of $539 million over 3 years for grants to support water and wastewater infrastructure. This is nearly a $124 million increase compared to last year. This water grant funding is provided to rural municipalities and is delivered through 3 water programs administered by the department: the Alberta Municipal Water Wastewater Program, Water for Life Program, and the First Nations Water Tie-In Program. In other grant funding, we are continuing to provide support for light rail transit projects in Edmonton and in Calgary. Our total provincial commitment is $3 billion over multiple years, of which $1.53 billion is for the Calgary Green Line LRT and $1.47 billion is for the Edmonton LRT projects. Budget 24 also provides an extra $43 million in new provincial funding for Calgary's Blue Line LRT project. Now, this funding will support the City of Calgary in extending the Blue Line to ultimately enable connection with the Calgary International Airport. Now, our government also recognizes the important role that passenger rail can play in our rapidly growing province, including regional rail between Edmonton, Calgary, and the Rocky Mountains. Commuter rail linking the largest urban centers to their surrounding municipalities and airports are also a priority. Budget 24 also includes $15 million over 2 years to support the development of a passenger rail master plan that will look forward decades and identify concrete actions that can be taken now and future actions to build the optimal passenger rail system for the province. Now, our government is also providing $237 million over 3 years to the City of Calgary for infrastructure to support the Calgary Rivers District and Events Centre to help revitalize Calgary's downtown. And we are continuing to provide $226 million in capital grant funding over 3 years to support 4 local infrastructure capital projects in the Edmonton region: the 50th Street grade separation over the CPKC tracks, the Yellowhead Trail improvements, the Twilliger Drive expansion in the southern part of Edmonton, and the Ray Gibbon Drive project. Now, together, all of these investments in Budget 24 will allow us to maintain a safe and efficient transportation network to support our economy and our high quality of life. And I know there'll be many questions from members on specific projects, and I'm happy to go through that. As Alberta Municipalities was here last week and RMA is here this week, we already have lots of communities from all across the province asking about priority projects for them. And a really interesting part that we'll go through with the estimates are, even though the certain years will have funding up and down, really that just goes to show how we pay for progress when it comes to construction projects. So if a project is ahead of schedule or behind schedule, the buckets of funding actually do fluctuate. So that'll be a main thing that I'm sure we'll discuss here in the estimates. But I would like to just take this time to thank my team. Bryce has been a fantastic deputy. I dare to say my favorite deputy in transportation, but hope people don't Google who the other one was. He has just been great and a solid team, and I just really appreciate your time, Chair, and the committee members' time, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Minister. We will now begin the question and answer portion of the meeting. For the first 50 minutes, members of the official opposition and the minister may speak. Our members, you will be able to see the timer for the speaking block in the committee room and on Microsoft Teams. Who will be speaking first? Member Knox, would you like to share time?
I'd like to go back and forth.
You'd like to go back and forth?
I
You
would.
okay with that? Okay,
Sounds
go
good.
ahead. You will have
Thank you,
50
Chair.
minutes to talk.
And always through you, sir, I'm grateful for the minister's decision to have a conversation about transportation and economic corridors and go back and forth, as we've done in the past, in estimates to shed some light on different elements of the 24-25 budget for tech. I'll start off by once again also thanking the staff members for diligently working to prepare for this. It's a lot of work to get involved and ready for today, and hopefully I take advantage of some of your homework and draw some more information out from the information you've prepared. I'm going to start off this morning, Minister, through the chair, asking a little bit about public-private partnerships. Now, many Albertans may be surprised to learn that unsuccessful proponents for P3 projects actually get paid by the province, even though they weren't successful in winning the bid. For the Red Deer Hospital, for example, unsuccessful proponents each get about a $1.15 million honorarium. Can the minister tell Albertans how much was paid to unsuccessful proponents for all P3 projects under his ministry's purview, including the failed Deerfoot P3 project, the Southwest Calgary Ring Road, and so on? It's a standard practice, I know, but it's something that many Albertans scratch their head about and wanting to know how much money has been paid for these unsuccessful contractors.
No, a great great question on P3s, and I'm happy to table this to the committee, just a nice map of the Calgary and Edmonton ring roads, and I guess I'd characterize it in a different way than my critic. Actually, the successful projects that we've had in these, they were broken up essentially into 8 different segments. The first 2 not having P3s on them, but obviously when a P3 is done, and I think the last one actually was done on the ring road by someone I know the member is very close to, Brian Mason, the NDP transportation minister at the time, actually signed off on the final P3 in Calgary. That was on the south, what direction is this? West, in 2016. So obviously our P3 and the debt servicing has been a success story dating all the way back to 2000. So there's 16 years of very successful P3s when it comes to transportation. And just, I can go on the maintenance and the other contracts, but here's just a very simple example of how they've been such a success story. The P3s actually lock in an interest rate for 30 years that obviously, yes, the province will pay into. But if anybody's had to redo their mortgages or any loans, obviously prime being at 7.2% today, and then whatever you have to go on top of that is quite a lot. But these P3s ranged from a 3 to 5.5% interest rate and has been locked in for 30 years.
Hey,
So
I don't really need a full education about P3s. I would ask him specifically about one practice of paying honorariums to failed bids, and that was specifically what I wanted to know about P3s, like how much were paid under your watch to failed bidders in P3 projects in your ministry in the last fiscal year.
So overall, for these P3s have been tremendous savings, and you're happy to go into the different ones of what we've actually saved on these projects in great detail. I'd say the southeast Anthony Henday, if you were talking about Edmonton, that had savings of $4 million back in 2004.
Just asking about how much was paid to failed bidders as an honorarium, that was the question. And if you don't have it at hand right now, that's fine. Simply pass it on in writing.
Well, I would just say,
afterwards.
if I could, Chair, these are overall projects, so there would be a payment, but then there's also the savings. So if I could go through the projects in detail to show that it's not just one side of the ledger that P3s and their complexity have. So the actual, to answer your very specific question, is $1.5 million for that project. But on the Northeast Stony Trail, there was a $350 million saving. Northwest Anthony Henday, there was a $200 million saving. The Southeast Stony Trail, these were all compared to a typical design build. The Southeast Stony Trail with the P3, there was over $1 billion saving back from 2010. Northeast Anthony Henday, there was a $400 million saving. So these are, just tremendous examples of the 6 P3s that were used on the Edmonton and Calgary ring roads of huge savings for taxpayers and
Thank
just
you
the
for that.
best
I was
amount of
looking
value
more
for
specifically
taxpayer
about
dollars.
the honorariums that were paid to failed bidders. So if you wouldn't mind, maybe pass that on in writing if you're not able to have that right now, because I've got a tremendous number of questions and we got lots of information to shed light on, and then we want to carry on. We have limited time.
Right, but just as I did, Mr. Chair, I did answer his question of the 1.5 million.
That was for the ones. All right, thank you very much. We'll move on. I wanted to talk about, Mr. Chair, about the slow down, move over regulations that have come through the ministers recently and implemented. I know that Bill 105 had slow down, move over requiring vehicles in the lane, in all lanes, to slow down and move over when a emergency vehicle or maintenance vehicle was parked on the side of the road with lights flashing. Now, since the change, though, the minister arbitrarily decided that only the lane closest to the stopped vehicle, maintenance vehicle or emergency vehicle, would have to slow down and move over. Since that change has taken place, contrary to Bill 5, which wanted all lanes to move over, 3 tow trucks have been struck in collisions since then, and 2 tow truck operators were seriously injured. The third received less serious injuries, but their association wants to know how this alteration to Bill 5 was justified. So I'm asking the minister through the chair, what reference and data caused the minister to ignore the unanimous vote of the legislature in support of Bill 5 in 2023 and independently order that only vehicles traveling in the lane next to a shoulder parked roadside maintenance or emergency vehicle had to slow down and move over? Like, first of all, what information did you have? What did you rely upon in making that decision contrary to the unanimous vote of the House?
So, Mr. Chair, actually, in the estimates, we actually have 1.47 million that actually went into the extensive public education campaign for the slow down and move over. And if you saw the flashing lights move over campaign, that was this department highlighting the harmonized rules. So I think that was something that we heard a lot from, whether it was maintenance workers, tow truck drivers, police, fire, anybody that actually is a roadside worker and does their job on the side of the road, that they wanted to know that there was harmonized rules, so that if you're driving up on any flashing lights, that you don't have to try to differentiate in the middle of the night what type of vehicle that is. You would treat them all the same, so there wasn't any confusion. So that was a big part of that campaign, to make sure that everybody was aware that regardless of what type of roadside worker, they would be treated the same, which is 60 kilometers if you have to drive beside that roadside worker speed limit, or moving over to the adjacent lane to be able to go the posted speed limit. So that is something that we wanted to harmonize the rule, to take away that confusion for motorists. But when it comes to snowplow safety, we actually introduced a new fine, that if anybody tries to pass a snowplow driver unsafely, that they can actually have a $243 fine and 3 demerits. And that was something, after talking with snow plow drivers, I think it's 30 or 40 accidents, I think about 40 plus accidents a year we're happening with unsafe passing of snow plows. So that's sometimes hitting the back of the truck, sometimes hitting the blade of the truck, and obviously doing damage to the truck, but also...
Just related to this, while you're on the topic, sir, if we could talk about enforcement measures regarding to slow down and move over, and you're talking about enforcement measures passing snow plows and increased fines, what enforcement measures have you now got to ensure that people who break the slow down, move over regulations are faced with? What fines and penalties are there?
Sure. As I was saying, we set the rules. So this public awareness campaign, making sure that people know how to pass safely a roadside worker. That's what we do within Transportation and Economic Corridors. On the enforcement side, that would be public safety, and I'm sure a question better suited for their estimates.
Right. Well, I certainly wanted to find out what fines and penalties there were, but the Tow Truck Operators Association and the Alberta Fire Chiefs Association certainly prompted me to ask this question about the slow down, move over regulations now that don't require lanes other than the lane most proximate to the shoulder to slow down, move over. They campaigned to have other lanes, all lanes slow down and move over. You've contravened that and now implemented just the one lane slowing down and moving over. So that's why I wanted to know how compliance is being monitored and also how is safety being monitored subsequent to this change, because the Fire Chiefs Association...
Chair, I don't believe this is relevant to our budget estimates. I'm looking at point of order 23B. This is the outside of the member opposite is asking a line of questioning, which is well outside the scope of this committee. I believe this because he's talking about public safety. This is not that and enforcement. That is under a different ministry. So I would love to be able to get back to the matter at hand, estimates for transportation and economic corridors.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't believe this is a point of order. The member from Grand Prairie is wildly out of touch with what's discussion here at hand. I'm looking at the Transportation and Economic Corridors Business Plan, and right at the bottom of page 145, it says safety and security. So I think talking about highway safety and security is well within the scope of our meeting today. This isn't a point of order, and the member should be allowed to continue his line of questioning.
What I'd like to say, I don't mind looking back in time for things to build contents to a question that's relevant to the budget or the business plan. But if you could identify the page number, if you're doing that, like if you're building context from past stuff and moving, saying, therefore referring to this page, I'd like
Should
to.
have done that in the very first instance. I was referring to estimates line 3, traffic safety programs, page 29, 229, I should
Okay,
say.
so we'll carry on, but just try to do that. from
Thank you,
this
sir.
point.
Well, just about finished that section, but suffice it to say that the Alberta Fire Chiefs Association and Tow Truck Drivers Association are rightly concerned with the regulatory changes that arbitrarily were adopted by the minister, and we're going to be monitoring enforcement as well as the accident rate that occurs as a result. Let's move on to graduated driver's licenses, Chair, if we could, and wondering how now that the holders of the graduated driver's licenses are no longer required to do a final road test, how is driver and traffic safety being monitored post-implementation? Can you provide data, Minister, through the chair, that verifies that all the changes that were made to the graduated driver's license system have not jeopardized public safety? So be specific if you have data. I know it's recently been changed, but public is rightly concerned about no longer having this final road test being done and are worried about the safety being jeopardized on the roadways.
Thank you, and yeah, to be specific, on page 229 of the estimates, and you actually look at 3.1, the traffic safety services, and as that drop in, or what perceived drop in funding, that actually highlights the GDL program. So obviously, the change that we made actually freeing up about 500,000 Albertans to not have to go take a second GDL, that shows that ramp up of services, and then obviously as GDLs are now being removed from licenses, that's where you see that savings. So that has been a wildly successful story, and I guess I would challenge the premise of your question that somehow our roads are unsafe or people are concerned about the safety of that GDL change, because we made it that the driver of a GDL, the holder of a GDL license, actually had to have 2 years free of any accidents and also of demerits. So these are probably I don't want to judge anybody's driving habits in this room, but these 500,000 Albertans were probably the safest drivers out there. But there was a bureaucratic red tape of having to have a GDL license or have a second test, where they had to take time and money out of their own pocket and waste their own time to try to get a
Through the
secondary
chair, thank you
test.
for that. I realize that you did it to save money, but the public is rightly concerned about removing that final road test as a means of confirming that the driver is actually a safe and well-prepared driver. So how are you monitoring that? Are you actually monitoring the accident rate of those that are no longer required to take that advanced road test?
Well, and how there was, I guess I'd put it this way, the 500,000 GDL license holders, they could have actually got a full-on Class 5. We found statistically only about 35% of Albertans would bother to actually go get a full Class 5, not because they were unsafe, just because they thought it was bureaucratic government overreach and didn't make any sense. Or probably because they maybe came from Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Prince Edward Island, or Quebec, where there is no secondary Class 5 license, and they just thought this was just an extra government overreach. So no, I think it's a wildly successful program. I don't know if you've had constituents or folks writing into your office saying how happy they were of a government red tape reduction initiative that actually benefited
Actually,
people.
through the chair, Minister, the complaints I received were concerns over public safety because they didn't have to take the test. But let's move on, if we may, through the chair, to another highway traffic matter, and that is excessive speed. And now you, Minister, I believe, had an RFP issued by the province just before the last election related to increasing the speed limit to 120 kilometers per hour on sections of Highway 2. If this occurs, what are the plans to support enforcement? And I'm referred to business plan key objectives 2.5 on page 149, traffic safety.
No, great question. And I know maybe don't spend as much time on Highway 2 as I do or some of the other members. But we actually have stats showing that I think is it the top 85 percentile? Or about 85% of motorists on Highway 2 are going 120 or more. So I think it is something, when you look at the design of Highway 2, like many many highways across the province or even in other jurisdictions, it is actually designed in a way that you have motorists wanting to go that 120, 130, because it's naturally designed and built for that way, for that speed. So that is something that we're obviously going to look at and review. There are certain sections that would need some improvements. Obviously, if you have too many on and off ramps or too much different flow of speeds going into a certain area, having a higher speed rate is a traffic safety concern.
All right, through the chair, a related question to that, as we know, and you've been aware, I'm sure, as minister, that higher speed creates, in collision situations, greater injury, greater property damage, and greater death statistics. What, if indeed you did decide to go through with this, what studies have you done to show what anticipated increase in collision damages, injury, and death would result in the increase of this 10 kilometers per hour maximum speed limit on sections of Highway 2?
So again, I would say, yes, the member is right that speed multiplies your problems when you're driving on the road. But I think this is something that we are looking at, we're reviewing to see where there are certain segments that we could increase the speed limit. And maybe something a little closer to home to the member is even the ring roads in Edmonton and Calgary. They're designed very well. They have a posted speed limit of 100. That is something that we're also considering as well, to know that what keeps up with a natural flow of traffic, that actually people are driving at a safe rate, but also something that they're comfortable to do with cars, modern day cars, with the safety features that they have, and just their natural inclination to drive at certain speeds that the road is actually designed for.
Through
So
the
that
chair,
is-
I wonder whether or not you're doing the cost-benefit analysis and what the demand is for this, because I fear that it's another arbitrary decision that you're heading towards without the demand coming from the public for this increase in speed. But, so I wanted to know what the outcome was of the RFP that you issued just before the last election. Is there any response from that?
So it's something that we're currently reviewing, and as I said, we're looking at other stretches of highway where this would make sense. So doing an RFP and doing a study, again, I would challenge the members' quip about doing things arbitrarily. We have lots of engineers, we have lots of traffic safety experts that are looking and reviewing this. So I think it's a little dismissive to the folks that have been working on this to say that it's somehow arbitrary.
Thank you. I certainly endeavor not to be dismissive, Mr. Chair. And through the chair, once again, a related question just quickly. Excessive speed, you mentioned that people tend to exceed the speed limit, Minister, regardless of the maximum being 110, they go faster. But there's also incidents and more increasing number of incidents where there's absolutely insanely excessive speeds being recorded by some people, and people are being caught. Now, are there any enforcement changes being planned to try to cut down the number of really excessive speeding incidents that we see?
Well, we do have, in the Traffic Safety Act, we do have rules stipulating that anyone traveling over 50 kilometers over the posted speed limit will have, very, very harsh penalties, a vehicle being towed. That is something that's pretty severe. But again, when it comes to enforcement, that's very important to make sure that we have enough police out patrolling in areas to make sure that they can catch excessive speeders, because as I mentioned before, speed always multiplies your problems, and if you're going 160 on Highway 2, that's too fast.
Right, and through the chair, to the minister, this is exactly why some municipalities and residents are looking to actually reduce the speed limit on Alberta highways going through their communities. Number one is Leduc. I recently was at the leadership conference for Alberta municipalities and was seated with officials and elected representatives from Leduc, who indicated that they've sought to get from your ministry a reduction in the speed limit to 90 kilometers per hour for the highway as it proceeds through Leduc, from south of the overpass as you come north to close to the turnoff to the Edmonton International Airport. Because of the number, as you mentioned, many of them have many exit and off ramps and on ramps. apparently there are 24 exit and ramps and entrance ramps along that stretch of roadway from Edmonton International Airport to the southern overpass in Leduc. And they are concerned about the congestion and the public safety there. Once again, referring to the business plan key objectives, traffic safety 2.5 on page 149, Mr. Chair. I sat with those elected officials, and they were looking to have that speed limit reduced from 110 to 90 in the interest of public safety through their community. Is that something that you have received? Are you aware of this? Is it on your radar? No pun intended. And are you looking to consider reduction in the interest of public safety?
Well, through you, Chair, I can do the member one better. We've lowered the speed limit to 80 kilometers due to the 65th Avenue interchange at Leduc by the Edmonton International Airport due to the construction that we're doing to build the overpass from downtown Leduc to kick across Highway 2 into the airport. But as soon as that construction is completed, it will go back to 110 kilometers an hour because Highway 2 is Alberta's main economic corridor, and we want to make sure that we have an efficient flow of traffic. Obviously, safety is a major concern, but we also have to make sure that we have an appropriate highway network that can move goods up and down our province. So once that construction is complete, we will see the speed limit going back up.
I understand. And through the chair, obviously, you'll know that elected officials and government officials locally in the county don't make these pleas to your ministry lightly, requesting a reduction in speed limit. So I'm sure they'll be sorry to hear that your intention is to disregard their concerns and maintain the 110 kilometer per hour speed limit through Leduc. The same thing may be said for people who live in Canmore, because there are calls for the reduction of the speed limit on that roadway from Bow River to the Park Gate to 90 kilometers per hour to match that speed which is required, the limit in the park. For the similar reasons, it's congestion, and there's many on ramps and exit ramps and entrance ramps there going into and out of Canmore, and also from a standpoint of noise as well. It's pretty close to the highway, so I'm getting the same type of complaints from residents in Canmore who wish to have that speed limit reduced on that section of roadway. Is that your similar response to them?
Well, I would say we actually have many requests coming in from municipalities for speed limit changes, sometimes to increase, sometimes to decrease. Obviously, as other construction projects are built or communities are expanded, we look at it at a case-by-case basis. So I think that's something that we always take internally and review, and we do sign off on ministerial orders for speed limit changes all the time. But I think that is something that we just review with municipalities, and we take the time to go through understanding their local concerns, again, overlaying that with our provincial road network. As I mentioned in my speech, we have 64,000 lane kilometers that we need to maintain and make sure that they're effective for goods transporting across this province, as well as to keep Albertans safe.
All right, thank you, Minister. Through the chair, once again, your answer was clear on that, Minister. I'll convey that to those communities. I want to move on to a pet peeve of mine, and I think many of the committee members may share this concern, Mr. Chair, perhaps even yourself. And it involves, if I can explain it correctly, making on an entrance ramp and an overpass going on to, say, the Henday or even the Yellowhead and Deerfoot Trail as well in Calgary. Quite often, the roadway's been designed so that you have to make a left-hand turn across traffic to get onto the merge lane to get onto Deerfoot, for example, I think off the Trans-Canada. Many of the ramps in Edmonton on the Henday have been designed this way, and I believe it was done to save money, because it's cheaper to do it rather than building a second merge ramp, just to merge as you normally would or normally expect to on a right-hand turn going onto the highway. And so, correct me if I'm not wrong, but I believe this was done to save money, and it's been a long-standing practice, and it's frustrating because in your business plan, the government strategic plan page 13, and the business plan key objectives, 1.1, page 148, talking about bottlenecks and eliminating bottlenecks. There's some serious traffic bottlenecks being created trying to get onto the Deerfoot, especially during rush hour, because of the left-hand turn requirement. It's a public safety issue as well, because you're making a left across traffic that should have been avoided had the roadway been designed in the first place to have a merge that went underneath and right-hand turn. Let me put it this way. Highway 3 twinning is happening over 8 stages in a number of years. Is it possible at this early stage for the ministry, Mr. Chair, to design these on-ramps and off-ramps and clover leaves without requiring left-hand turns across traffic to get onto the entrance of the freeway? Because it's an antiquated, and I think you're cheaping out to do it that way. And Albertans deserve a properly operating cloverleaf system of entrance and exits. What say you?
Well, actually, it's going to be weird saying this, but actually, I agree with you. That is something that, obviously, the design and the flow of traffic, we want to make sure it obviously is in an efficient way. But another thing that we're looking at too, and other jurisdictions, especially with higher population, as we're growing by hundreds of thousands of new Albertans every year, and our population keeps growing, we are looking at traffic patterns and traffic flow, and the fact that some of these intersections now, with more of a steady stream of vehicles, what does that do to congestion? And I know in certain U.S. states, they actually have it's a metering system to go onto a highway. So you essentially have any on-ramps going on, and I'm sure in Calgary and Deerfoot, when you drive down Deerfoot, you'll see 50 or 60 cars coming in a train, all merging onto Deerfoot all at once. And that just affects all lanes of Deerfoot and slows it right down, where in certain U.S. states, they'll actually throttle that or temper that flow of traffic coming onto Deerfoot, so only a couple of cars go at a time, so it doesn't disrupt the whole flow of the main highway. So there are obviously other jurisdictions that we look at to see how we could improve our traffic flow as our population grows. So I think your idea of making better designs, others to make sure there's a better flow of traffic coming onto our highways is a great point.
All right, thanks. Through the chair to the minister, talking about bridges. I know that bridge conditions are a big concern to the public as well as the ministry. Can the minister tell Albertans what the current percentage of Alberta bridges that are in very poor, or fair condition?
Great question. If you go to estimates on 230 and 231, there is the 120 million for bridge construction projects under 10, and then in 11 there's the 120 million on top of that, or the 30 million, sorry, I should say, on top of that 120 million for bridge projects, and that's a lot of money, and that goes to a lot of big bridge projects, but we do have a lot of aging bridges, and that's just the fact that a lot of them were built 50, 60 years ago. U.S. Army Corps of Engineers built a lot of bridges throughout Alberta going up to Alaska, and they're all now nearing their end of life. So I know through STIP, we're giving grants to municipalities to help their aging bridges, because a lot of their municipal-owned bridges are in the same state as our provincial-owned bridges. As I mentioned, we have almost 5,000 just provincially, and a lot of them are nearing that end of life. So it is something that we're putting more investments into them to make sure that we're not having to see weight restrictions, we're not having to see even bridge closures of deteriorating bridges. So it is something that we're taking very seriously, and we're working with municipalities to make sure that we can get the funding.
Thank you, and through the chair, once again, on the same topic, Minister, continuing on with respect to bridge conditions, because this is a debt to future Albertans by any other name, because it's something, it's repairs that need to be done that aren't budgeted for, because you have already admitted that it's a bigger project than you're being able to fully fix, of course, in one budget. But assuming current funding levels, when does the ministry project that all Alberta highway bridges would be brought to at least good condition? Assume there's 75% of our bridges are in poor, fair, or very poor condition, according to Alberta Road Builders and Heavy Construction Association, and the ministry's own data supports that claim. This is a huge debt to future Albertans, and I don't think we're tackling it as a high enough priority. Granted, you're certainly spending, Mr. Chair, a fair bit of money, but how many years would it take to get us to have all our bridges in good condition at current levels of funding?
So I'd hate for anyone watching this to get the misconception that somehow our bridges are unsafe. If our bridges are operational, they are safe. If they have a load restriction, they are safe. And that is something that, as I mentioned, the 120 million plus the 30 million in additional bridge construction, that is trying to make sure that they are being maintained and they're not having to have any weight restrictions placed on them. But the member did mention debt. An intergenerational debt. And I would like to remind the member that it was his party in 4 years that actually accumulated $80 billion worth of debt. And if you look at the government's estimates of this year, $3.3 billion this year is being paid to service the debt that his party and they were in government brought in. And the entire budget of transportation and economic corridors in these estimates is $3.3 billion. So had the NDP never existed, we could have doubled Transportation Economic Corridors budget.
Thank you for that enlightening diatribe, Mr. through the chair. Of course, Albertans are shocked. I'm not saying the Alberta bridges are unsafe, but 75% of our bridges are not in good condition, and that's a huge amount of work that needs to be done, and it just never seems to be getting any better over time. Year over year, it seems to be that we're still stuck with that 75% number, and we're not making a lot of headway. So my point was, Mr. Chair, to find out why it's not a larger priority. Granted, you're spending a chunk of money now, but it's not enough in order to make headway, as far as I can calculate. And have you been pushing in cabinet to make sure that we attack this problem? Because we're looking for people to come here. Talk about economic corridors. The bridges are a vital part of that economic corridor and highway system, and yet they're being neglected. And it's your responsibility as minister, I would think, to really campaign as hard as you can to improve this priority within cabinet and get more money spent on repairing or refixing our bridges.
I again, the second time I said this, which seems weird, but I agree with the member, and that's why we are seeing an increase in funding for bridges. As I mentioned, the 120 million, the new funding for 30 million in the bridge bundling program. And again, thinking outside the box, actually, I should have mentioned this, when it comes to the bridge bundling project, that's working with construction companies that can even do economies of scale, where they can build bridge components, stockpile them, and then as we go through specific bridges, almost like a Lego kit to be able to just piece together a bridge and just to be able to cut down on the costs there. So again, we think if there's a way in which we can bundle these projects together and get that economies of scale and obviously do more and repair and replace more with less tax dollars is something that we're already started on with that $30 million bridge bundling that's in the estimates.
Thank you. Through the chair, are you working with, as a ministry, ways to involve Alberta companies in this new technology that you just mentioned about component manufacturing of bridges? Because it's certainly something that we probably could do in Alberta rather than relying upon importing steel and components from elsewhere.
Yep, we because obviously in Transportation Economic Corridor, we contract the work out to companies. We don't actually do the building ourselves. So yes, to answer your question, we do work with lots of Canadian companies, large and small, to make sure that they have a chance and opportunity to bid on these projects. And that's something that I would say, and just if I could point just to the estimates on 231, just on 11.1, just kind of the major maintenance and rehabilitation, you include that 456 million on rehabilitation projects, as well as 120 million on bridges. That total comes to about 577 million, and you compare that to the 10-year average of those types of rehabilitation bridge projects. The average for the last 10 years has been 402 million. And
Thanks
so
for that.
I just want, if I
Minister.
could just finish this thought. Chair.
Go ahead.
The 577 million is actually a 42% increase over the 10-year average. So again, the member is talking about why don't I advocate more or fight for more rehabilitation funding? A 42% increase over a 10-year average is pretty significant.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree, it is a large increase, but obviously with the number of bridges that need to be repaired, replaced, we need even more investment than the rate that it's currently at. Let's move to some specific projects, Mr. Chair. Vinca Bridge, I remember driving over this bridge many, many times when I worked in the oil patch outside of Redwater, driving my gin poles, moving blowout preventers and pumps and tanks for the service rigs that I was moving. And I even knew then that there were lots of vehicles that couldn't go on that bridge because it was not rated for that type of weight and high loads. So it's good to know that there's something's going to be happening with the Vinca Bridge, but by the time it's actually completed, I'm wondering if it will actually meet the projected traffic volumes, or will we have to add another lane to it within 5 years like we had to do on the Henday. So regarding estimates line 10, bridge construction projects on page 230 and the capital plan, page 8, when can we expect this Vinca Bridge project to be finished? Because I think we're just in the planning stage now, at nearing completion of planning.
Yeah, so the structural design for the Vinca Bridge was actually completed in 22-23, and the tender for the construction of the Vinca Bridge project can now actually proceed this year. So that we would ideally see construction starting next year. But Budget 24 actually has $30 million in funding over the next 3 years for the Vinca Bridge replacement. So obviously there's the current Vinca Bridge. We're building the new Vinca Bridge beside it, and then we'll carry on from there. So that obviously, Highway 38 bridge, is a very vital, important infrastructure project for the industrial heartland and for the province. And I'm happy to hear that the member having a background in oil and gas, and I maybe wonder why he's on that side of the chamber. But it is a very important project, and obviously so many workers cross there, but as well as heavy loads with oil and gas products. And when you look at the future of this province, to be able to grow and expand that region is important. And the Vinca Bridge is a very key economic corridor development project that we're happy to see construction at least in 2025.
That's great. Through the chair, I agree with you on the construction going forward being a good thing. Wondering though if the P3 model will be used for the Vinca Bridge, and if it, in general, bridges are built under the P3 model, or if they're usually design build because of the nature of their construction.
So for the Vinca Bridge, what we've done is it will be a design build. So what we've engineered, the structural design, what we've done to this point will be a design build. And when we, again, get more engineering done, so there's a better scope of the actual technical work that's going to be done, then, as I said, we'll put it out for tender late this year. But on this, if I could, Mr. Chair, we've actually had a procurement forum and met a couple of times now with the construction industry to make sure that when we do put out projects, that we don't get surprised, kind of a sticker shock of what the department and what we anticipate the project cost should be, and then all of a sudden bids coming in way above that from multiple bidders. And what we've learned is that there are risk factors that get baked into some of these projects. So the more, and risk factors being change orders or something that wasn't really defined very well through engineering, and obviously the scope changes, and then all of a sudden things get more expensive. So we want to make sure that we do a lot of engineering up front on this project, so that we're very specific in what we actually tender out for the private sector to bid on, so that we're in a lot more reasonable space when it comes to that overall cost.
Yeah, thank you. And through the chair, once again, to the minister, I know that you probably want to do a lot of engineering work on this other bridge project that I want to ask about, which seems to have faded into the background a little bit from where it was, because the community was really up in arms and demanding the bridge be replaced based on an engineer's report showing it to be near imminent failure. It's the County of Slave Lake, Smith Bridge I'm talking about. And I'm wondering what emergency repairs have been taken to stabilize the Smith Bridge until the government decides to promote the economic development and oil and gas and forestry opportunities that would be realized by the construction of a new Smith Bridge, according to local politicians and residents.
Great question, and you're all over, good questions, Lauren.
Thank you so much.
I thought this was gonna come from, the MLA from Slave Lake. We do have engineering dollars, for the Smith Bridge. We've been working with the municipality, actually toured it, last year before the election, to see the bridge strikes that were happening, just the deterioration of not just the bridge structure itself, but also the pilings in the river. So it is a very important project. So it is something that, with the engineering, we're hoping we will see, progress on that, because when you look at not just the community of Smith south of that bridge, but also the oil play in and around that area is significant. And we want to make sure that we can have this bridge built, and again, it's another one of our economic corridors, that we're highlighting to make sure that we can have a bridge and a highway network that can maintain the oil and gas, work that goes on in that area.
Right, and thank you for that. And to follow up a little bit, Mr. Chair, I'm just wondering, related to that comment just made by the minister, I wonder what studies the minister's undertaken to determine the economic activity that would be enabled or enhanced by building that new Smith Bridge, because there is a wide area of resource development that has been laying fallow in that area, and the minister might also be surprised to learn that I used to go hunting up in that area, so around Smith and Athabasca River. It's an area that has that potential as well for recreational opportunities. What has been stalled, or what economic activity hasn't taken place? What's the value of getting this bridge replaced? I know that previously it was being dismissed because of the low traffic volumes, but what's the anticipated increase in traffic should that bridge get built?
I'm not the one to ask about floor crossing, but your oil and gas background, hunting and fishing, like, it's incredible.
Don't get your hopes up.
But I go to our resource revenue map work that we're doing within the department. To your question of, what will be the cost benefit analysis of these types of projects? Obviously, the engineering, the design of it is 1.65 million that we've provided. What we think would be the cost of that bridge is 76 million. But if you just look at the typical car counts that the department does look at for replacements of certain roadways or bridges, that doesn't work in a place like this, where there's billions of dollars of oil and gas investment. There's hundreds of millions of dollars of direct revenues that the province receives from oil and gas up in that region. So there's the cost benefit analysis of a $76 million bridge that may not have a lot of people driving across it, but has huge economic benefits to the province. And that's something that we're actually working with RMA right now on developing this resource revenue map, which will actually show the $15 to $18 billion a year that Alberta receives in royalty revenue from oil and gas. Where does that come from? And it obviously, no offense, doesn't come from your riding in Edmonton or in Calgary. It comes from rural Alberta. And how can we make sure that we have a road and bridge network across the province that actually allows for the growth and expansion of this project and the revenues that we need to spend on all the things that Albertans love and enjoy?
Right, thank you again. Follow up through the chair, and in relation to your last remark, I would remind the minister that West Edmonton Mall does pay taxes. So there is revenue coming out of my riding. But I wanted to ask the minister about the highway conditions. We talked about bridges, but let's move on to highway conditions in the limited time I've got left in this block. Can the minister tell the Albertans what current percentage of Alberta highways are in very poor, or fair condition? And this is a chronic percentage that seems to not change as well, similar to bridges.
Well, we've had a good back and forth so far, but the fact that Fantasyland is in your riding doesn't surprise me. But I would say, sorry, for the good, fair, and poor targets, we do actually have, for good, we have 58%, for fair, 26%, and for poor, down to 16. So 58, 26, 16% of the physical condition of our provincial highway services.
Yeah, the historical number seems to not really change a lot from the 2000 17-18 numbers I'm looking at down to 2008 and 2009, it seemed to be somewhere in the neighborhood of like 43% of our highways are not rated in good condition. And I'm just wondering if the minister finds this chronic level of disregarded or deferred maintenance to be acceptable, or is it something that, as the Minister for Transportation and Economic Corridors, sees as a detriment to investment in the province because our roadway system is not keeping up? Now, we used to have, you could almost drive from outside provinces, from Saskatchewan and British Columbia, blindfolded and tell when you're entering Alberta because the road conditions improved. But you can't say that anymore. It's actually the opposite, because those neighboring provinces seem to have better conditioned roads than we do. And the maintenance is an ongoing critique that I'm hearing from municipalities and truckers and Albertans who, when I sat down at Alberta municipalities, every table I sat at, immediately in response to my question about, what are you concerned about in your area, it was roadways and maintenance and potholes and road conditions. And I've had people wearing T-shirts, can't drive 55 up around Athabascus, demanding that the road be repaired. It just deferred maintenance or neglected maintenance, kicked down the road that it seems to be chronic. And that's something I think, if we're looking at getting people to come here and invest, and their economic corridors are important, let's get the basics fixed, get our roadways up to absolutely top-notch shape again so we can boast about them being the best in the country again.
First off, I would recommend people not drive blindfolded. I'm not saying that was hopefully not a real comment.
Passengers.
But, okay. But we typically do about 1,000 kilometers of road work in the province on an annual basis. And as I mentioned before, a 42% increase in this budget over the 10-year average of our highway rehabilitation and capital maintenance, I think, goes a long way to make sure that to the member's point, Chair, to try to keep up with the growing demands. And as a federal government who has said by 2035 they want to have an electric vehicle mandate, where they're banning of any new oiling or any new gas vehicles. Electric vehicles, typically, if you look at just an F-150 Lightning versus a regular F-150, the Lightning's about 22% heavier. So that's pounding out our roads even more. So it's something that, obviously, with a growing population, with more vehicles on our roads, with possibly heavier electric vehicles on our roads, we do need to make sure that we have adequate funding for our rehabilitation and to make sure our roads are up to snuff. Because it's not just a nice, smooth driving experience, which obviously is important, but it's also a safety feature as well, to make sure that our roads are designed in a way that the roughness index that we actually use to actually have the fair, poor, and good rating actually makes sense.
Right, thank you. And through the chair, once again, to continue on this theme about highway maintenance, given that the Alberta Road Builders and Heavy Construction Association, I'm referring to estimates line 4, provincial highway maintenance, page 229, given that they've stated that Alberta needs to double its current level of investment for proper highway maintenance and preservation, and given that the preservation cost for an average kilometer of highway is 5 times less than the cost of reconstruction, can the minister please explain how many years it'll take with this current level of spending on maintenance to get all Alberta highways rated to be in good condition?
If, as I said before, if that $80 billion of NDP debt had not existed, we would be able to double our budget.
Thank you very much. That concludes the first portion of questions for the official opposition. We will now go to the independent member for 20 minutes. Could you introduce yourself for the record, please?
It's Jennifer Johnson, MLA for Lacombe-Panoka.
Okay, would you like to share time with the minister?
Sure, time would be great if the minister's
Minister.
willing.
Yeah, okay, go ahead. You got 20 minutes.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you to the minister. Page 148 of the ministerial business plan states that Transportation Ministry will develop a passenger rail master plan as the foundation to advance passenger rail in Alberta. The master plan will look forward and include a 15-year delivery plan to prioritize investments. This is also reflected on page 150, 3.2, to access to assess feasibility and develop a passenger rail master plan. 9 million has been allocated for the development of this plan, including a 15-year delivery plan. There is talk of Alberta's population increasing to 5 million in the near future and potentially 10 million by 2050. Population increases are often realized in our urban centers. The possibility of a high-speed rail system connecting Calgary and Edmonton has been talked about for decades. How will this passenger rail master plan work towards this goal?
Thank you very much for that question. And it is a pretty exciting project to have within my mandate letter from Premier Smith on the master rail the passenger rail master plan. Sorry, it is an exciting time in Alberta when it comes to rail projects. We for years have looked at LRT projects within Edmonton and Calgary. Light rail projects to see how we could effectively and efficiently move people around our two biggest cities. But this master plan is how can that be connected into a broader rail strategy? So that goes everything from a commuter type system that they have, like a Metrolinx that they have in Ontario, where you could have surrounding communities of Edmonton and Calgary connected by passenger rail. As well as a possibility of a high-speed train between Edmonton and Calgary, which I know has been talked about and proposed for a long time in Edmonton, as well as to Calgary to Banff project as well for tourists coming in from the Calgary International Airport to be able to directly go out to Banff, and then obviously how rail connections from downtown cores in Edmonton and Calgary to the airports. Really exciting times to be able to see how, with Edmonton and Calgary, with their municipal LRT projects, how they can connect into a provincial rail system, whether it be a commuter one or between Edmonton and Calgary and beyond. So it's a very ambitious project, but you're right. It's going to take 2 years of engineering at a very detailed level to see where exactly we could go with these new tracks, and then obviously a ridership assessment to see is it actually feasible. And if everything goes well, we would hope to see construction kind of in that year 3, year 4, but would most likely take about 10 years to achieve. So it is a 15-year strategy, which as a government with always 4-year shelf lives, it's hard to think big and broad in 15-year terms. But it is a pretty ambitious initiative that we're undertaking.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the Minister. As a rural MLA in a rural constituency, transportation can be an issue for some, whether it's through school busing, transportation of goods, or even just getting to work. The option does not exist for most in rural Alberta to just take the bus. As the population increases, likely concentrated again in urban centers, how can rural Albertans be assured that their local road system will not only remain maintained, but that roads will continue to be built?
No, great question. And as I mentioned in the previous back and forth with the NDP, we actually have a 42% increase in our rehabilitation budget, comparing that to the 10-year average. So obviously we have more and more roads here in the province. We have 64,000 lane kilometers in our provincial highway network, as well as nearly 5,000 bridges. And with a growing population and growing industrial investments, we'll need to have more bridges and more roads. So to be able to make sure that we can maintain what we have, plus build new, is I think it's why it's reflected in the estimates that we have a 42% increase on that, which is great. But as a neighbor, yes, Lacombe, Ponoka to Innisfil, Sylvan Lake, obviously Highway 2 going in between our ridings or going through our ridings is important. And actually I'm happy to say that there are 2 major bridge replacements on Highway 2 south of Lacombe that are in this budget as well. And obviously Highway 2 twinning, we look at, I think just north of you it gets a little smoother, and then in our ridings it's maybe a little rougher. So we're obviously looking at repaving on Highway 2 as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, to the Minister, and I'll come back to that in a bit. Highway 604 in Lacombe, Ponoka was first commissioned for grading, base, and full paving in 2008 for 11 kilometers. Work was partially done, but never completed, and remains incomplete to this day, in spite of being a high-traffic road and critical for local traffic, a gravel quarry, construction and intensive livestock, and other agricultural operations. Is there a plan to complete this important piece of road, and where does this fit into the current budget?
So 604, west of Highway 2 is in the engineering stage right now, so planning and engineering. What typically happens for our projects is it goes into planning and design, then goes into engineering, and then goes into the construction world. So as I mentioned before, we want to make sure that when we tender out these projects to the private sector, that we have them engineered as much as possible so that we can get very accurate bids and low bids. Because if there is any vagueness in the project, vagueness being not engineered enough, then we do see risk factors that get baked in to the bids so that they're essentially just higher. So we want to make sure that we can be as detailed as we can in the engineering so that we have very accurate bids coming in so we get more value for taxpayer dollars. So that project is, as I said, just in the engineering stage, and once it is refined as much as it can be, it'll go out for tender.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, to the Minister, and for that great news. On page 149 of the Ministerial Business Plan 2.4, work with law enforcement and municipalities to ensure automated traffic enforcement, commonly known as photo radar, is focused on traffic safety and not revenue generation. It seems as if this photo radar might be falling under several ministries, but for your ministry, how much photo radar has been decommissioned and how much is remaining, and how has this affecting revenue?
So great question, and as you mentioned, it is within multiple ministries, the use of photo radar. Obviously, we set the rules for photo radar and the locations that where they get set up, and that's actually why we took off the photo radar on the Edmonton and Calgary ring roads, because when you look at the stats, it was unfortunately used for revenue generation and not for traffic safety. When you have a multi-lane highway as straight as an arrow and having photo radar there with no accidents, that's not about traffic safety, that's about revenue generation. So we removed them from the ring roads, and we're now actually going through, and actually be starting this summer, working on the remaining of the 2,400 photo radar locations across the province with the 25, I think, municipalities that currently use them, to make sure that they are being used for traffic safety and not for revenue generation. So that is something that we're very cognizant of, because it's the whole point of traffic enforcement is to make sure that you're enforcing the current rules, and it's not just a cash cow for local municipalities.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, to the Minister. It is good to hear that it's going to be for safety and not just revenue generation, and working with the municipalities on that. Just in case there were issues like of photo radar, being clocked at 90 and an 80, not that I would know anything about that. On page 150 of the performance measures, physical condition of provincial highway surfaces, and we've heard about this already from my colleague. In 2022-23, 58% of our highways were rated good, and as the Minister said, 26% were fair and 16% poor, with targets forecast to remain at these rates for the foreseeable future. How do these rates compare to the past 10 years, and how does it compare to other provinces?
Great question, and when we look at the estimates on page 231 and through section 11, the $456 million in this year's estimates is substantive, but plus the $120 million in bridge contracts from page 230. That total of $577 million is actually a 42% increase from that 10-year average. So although Alberta, we grew by almost 200,000 people last year, 100,000 people by the year before, that's 3 cities of Red Deer in 2 years that the province grew. We need to make sure that we can rehabilitate the 64,000 lane kilometers that we have already and the almost 5,000 bridges, but also to be able to build additional roads and additional lanes on highways to make sure that we can accommodate that growth. So 42% is a significant increase. I know if there was more, we would be able to build more, but I think 42% is a very good start. And as you said, should try to make sure that good rating is maintained or improves is something that we're always going to work towards. But I would just say, and I mentioned it before, but the $80 billion of NDP debt that they saddled Albertans with for their 4 years of government, just the annual debt servicing costs is $3.3 billion. And the entire budget of transportation and economic corridors is ironically $3.3 billion. So just paying off the annual debt servicing of $80 billion NDP debt is, you could easily double transportation economic corridors budget if we weren't saddled with that $80 billion intergenerational NDP debt. So that's why having balanced budgets is obviously important, but also investing in our critical infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To the Minister. With what some would say is federal overreach into our province, in saying maybe perhaps we should stop building roads, how can the Minister ensure again that rural Alberta is being serviced? Great question.
It is frustrating. The National Trade Corridor Fund is a federal program in which I think it's $4.6 billion over 11 years, and it's actually the program's nearing its end, which is obviously an issue for the province of Alberta. We transfer so many billions of dollars to Ottawa, but this federal program, the last 9 projects that we put in as a province, we received 0 for 9 on those projects. And that goes everything from Highway 3 to 686 up in the northern part of the province to many other important trade corridor projects. And it was very frustrating to see that 0 for 9 score. I always say if we were an NHL hockey team and your power play was 0 for 9, you'd be asking a lot of questions about the management, and the coaching staff. But it is something that, on top of that, we have the NDP Liberal Coalition in Ottawa and Minister Guilbeault talking about no new road funding. And he actually said those comments right before all the transportation ministers across the country were meeting in Montreal with the actual federal transportation minister. And when all the transportation ministers got to Montreal for the FPT meeting, the clarifying point that Minister Rodriguez said to Minister Guilbeault was, well, he just meant, and no new funding for large projects. Well, that is the National Trade Corridor Fund. So we'll see the federal government if they're going to renew that fund in their upcoming budget in April. We're really, for Alberta's standpoint, we're just trying to get our money back from what we send into Ottawa. But we are hoping that the National Trade Corridor Fund gets renewed. I actually asked for it to be increased, not just at the $4.6 billion over 3 years, but to actually match the Public Transit Fund, which is $3 billion a year for 11 years. So for a $33 billion total envelope of funding for the National Public Transit Fund from the federal government. So to bump up that $4.6 billion for the National Trade Corridor Fund to at least match the Public Transit Fund. And I know our friends in the NDP here could pick up the phone and ask Jagmeet Singh to make that happen in the upcoming budget, and I hope they do that. But that is something that we're obviously advocating for Alberta's fair share of federal funding. But that would be a big win if the National Trade Corridor Fund gets replenished and actually funded at the same level as the Public Transit Fund from the federal government.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair, to the Minister. And on page 152 of the Ministerial Business Plan, Ring Road's debt servicing is about $100 million. It does drop off substantially, which is good news, but can the Minister speak to what this debt servicing involves, the funding model around it, and the decrease in coming years?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, the P3s that we had on the ring roads were huge Alberta success stories, and I'm sure people will write about that for years to come. And one of the main reasons was even just the locking in of the interest rate being anywhere from 3 to 5%, and anybody having to redo a mortgage now or any debt now, you're looking at prime at 7.2%. So these locked in for 30 years are a huge benefit and bonus to the Alberta taxpayers. And as I mentioned before, the specific savings that we had on all of these projects ranged from millions to over $1 billion. For the 6 P3s that we have on the ring roads. So they were huge success stories. I know that the NDP likes to say they don't like P3s, but yet it was the NDP in 2016 that actually themselves signed on to a P3. I think Transportation Minister at the time, Brian Mason, maybe he was a more enlightened NDP than the ones that we have now. But the P3s have been a huge success story for Alberta and for the ring roads in Calgary and Edmonton.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair, to the Minister for that. And my final question is about capital investment in Lacombe-Pinoka. As you mentioned, there is a new bridge going south of Lacombe on Highway 2? And I believe there could be a project, Highway 12, east of Lacombe to Clive. And could the Minister elaborate on that, and if there is anything else going to be coming to that constituency?
You're an excellent local MLA. I know going through all the different projects is very important, and the Highway 2 project near Clive is in that design phase. As I mentioned before, you do the design phase, obviously looking at land purchasing or additional land that may be required, and then the engineering and then construction. So that Highway 12 is a 15-kilometer paving project near Clive. And as I said, yes, the two major bridge replacements on Highway 2 south of Lacombe is whether it's the CPR overpass, they're in the design phase, and land acquisition is underway in preparation of those two bridge structures and the related roads around the bridges. So there's also just in your riding, if I could, Mr. Chair, a new bridge-size culvert that's near Highway 2 as well, near Lacombe. That's in the design phase. We're also looking at, as I said, for Highway 2 from Red Deer to Leduc, which is a variety of safety improvements along Highway 2. We're doing the planning stages for that. Engineering is also underway for a second phase of paving from Highway 604, west of Highway 2, as we mentioned before. Design is underway for a flood protection berm at Buffalo Lake to address water management issues in the riding of Lacombe-Pinoka, as well as a grant to the Shirley McClellan Regional Water Services Commission through the Water for Life program, which again is our 3 water programs. Water for Life is another one that will actually address regional water needs from Denalta all the way up to Balf. So that's another project within your area that is within these estimates.
I'm going to end with one quick one. 134 million is allocated under the Provincial Water for Life, as you just mentioned. First Nations Water Tie-in Program and Capital Regional Wastewater Treatment to support municipal and regional water and wastewater priority projects. On page 101 of Ministerial Business Plan, how many Indigenous communities currently don't have access to fresh water, and how many communities will the budget be able to help?
So our First Nation water tie-in program is something that I'm very, very proud of, and working with First Nations to make sure that they have access to clean water. And so obviously what the program does is it goes from a regional water line and it builds the pipeline, the infrastructure up right to the edge of a reserve. And then it's obviously working with the First Nation and also the federal government to make sure it goes that final mile in the reserve to First Nations communities. So in total, there's 48 First Nations in Alberta, and 7 of them are actually connected to regional water systems. And I know that there's been 14 First Nations projects that have been approved for funding, of which 12 have actually been completed already. So as I mentioned before, we pay on progress within our estimates. So just because there was a whole bunch of projects that are now nearing completion doesn't show a lack of priority of that program. It just shows that it was a success, that we're actually having pipes in the ground, and we actually have the water tie-in program was a success, and now finally the federal government taking it that final mile is at the next stage. So if I have time, Chair, I go through the actual completed projects. The Paul First Nation water line to Wabamun, the Alexis Nakota Sioux First Nation, Cold Lake First Nation, Whitefish, Denita First Nation.
Quite maker. Yeah. That concludes the first portion of questions from the independent member. We will now move to the 20 minutes for the government caucus members. And would you like to share time?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead. You have 20 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to the Minister, I'm glad to see, Minister, on page 8 of the capital plan, that budget 2024 allocated 30 million over 3 years for the Vinca Bridge replacement. Minister, this is a critical need for the industrial heartline and is very important to the hardworking Albertans from Fort Saskatchewan who drive Alberta's energy sector. Minister, you spoke of the importance of the $30 million Vinca Bridge replacement already, but can you speak to other transportation infrastructure projects in Alberta's industrial heartland, specifically my constituency of Fort Saskatchewan-Vegreville?
I'm not supposed to have favorite MLAs, but when you look at the air utility announcement that we did just yesterday, MLA Armstrong Hominick, the 50, well, you had your chance. The $50 million investment into air utilities, which helps out 13 municipalities around the Edmonton region, lowering or will eventually lower water rates for 400,000 Albertans in that Edmonton region is huge. And also a great example of how municipalities can work together on these regional water programs. So you have economies of scale of municipalities working together, obviously the provincial government stepping up and helping with engineering as well as financially contributing to the projects and funding the projects. But yeah, the Vinca Bridge is going to be so important to the industrial heartland. And it is going to be a very complex project. When we have the engineering and design dollars, as you mentioned, the $30.8 million over the next 3 years for the Vinca Bridge replacement, that's really just the start, because there'll be other construction dollars in future years that'll probably clock in at around $100 million for that bridge when it's finally completed. So the twinning or the build of the new Vinca Bridge beside the existing Vinca Bridge will be a very important project for your riding, as well as for the industrial heartland in the entire province, because of they pay a little more taxes than West Edmonton Mall. The industrial heartland and the jobs that they create is just fantastic and helps out that surrounding area. So yeah, the Vinca Bridge is a very important economic corridor construction project that I'm proud to advocate for, and I know you are as well.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you for your answer, Chair. Through you, I would like to cede the rest of my time to MLA Sinclair.
Thank you to my colleague, and thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Minister, and your team for all your incredibly hard work. I will say, in terms of being your favorite MLA, I'm pretty happy that I got pretty thick skin, thicker than I used to have even, I might say. As I've said before, I'm the MLA for Lesser Slave Lake, and I would commend you on the numerous visits you've made to my riding, even in the short time that I've been elected. Really helps highlight the importance, especially Highway 88, which is probably a bit of a broken record, both for you and your ministry from me, but it runs north from Slave Lake, for those who don't know, all the way past Fort Vermilion, and it's an essential corridor for trade, supporting both the oil and forest industries, as well as a primary point of access to and from my hometown of Slave Lake. However, there is a need for safety improvements to the intersection, overall maintenance, and I know the government has committed to this necessary work. I was wondering if the minister could please speak to whether Budget 2024 includes design funding for repairs and upgrades to Highway 88, including, I'm hopeful, the widening of the road for proper shoulders and installing proper turning lanes. Thank you, Minister.
Yeah, great question, and you're not a broken record. Highway 88 is another example of a very important economic corridor in this province. And as I mentioned before, the resource revenue map that we're working with municipalities to figure out, of the $18 billion of non-renewable resource revenue coming from rural Alberta, where exactly does it come from? And actually, I'll give credit to constituents in your area, MLA Sinclair, that we actually, the idea was spawned out of a meeting that I had up in your riding with them when they were looking at a new oil and gas company being able to drill a lot more and to have a new play that was just discovered up in your area. They were very excited about it, but they knew that Smith Bridge was going to be a limiting factor of that development. So, and obviously the benefits that would go in that surrounding community, but also to the province. And that's something that resource revenue map that I mentioned to show where exactly does the revenue of this government, where does it actually come from? And to be able to identify that, Highway 88, Smith Bridge, so many of these projects that, even though they may not have the traffic counts, are very important. And you're right, Highway 88 was planned to be repaved and smoothed out. But to local concerns and your concerns as well, Emily Sinclair, talking about how the truck traffic meeting with the regular traffic, and the short shoulders that are on that, or non-existing shoulders in certain parts, that's not a safe roadway. So we are, within this budget, looking at rescoping that project to make sure that we have the design and the engineering for a wider road. So it'll take longer, but it's the right thing to do to make sure that we can improve Highway 88 and the safety for so many people in that area.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I also just wanted to briefly mention that the members opposite here, he does a lot of hunting in my riding, so if you'd like to buy a membership, I can hook him up with the right people after the meeting's done, and be happy to sell him a membership for a riding, since he's so invested in it, which I'm very excited about. For the rest of my time, Mr. Chair, I would like to cede it to my colleague, MLA Hunter. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you to the Minister. Thank you for the work you've done on the Highway 3 twinning. I know that for probably 3 decades at least that I know of, and maybe even longer than that, there's been the dream of being able to have a twinned highway from province to province. Under your leadership and your vision of being able to see that as an economic corridor, you were able to actually get that done. And so thank you for that work. That is going to be a great benefit to Alberta and Southern Alberta for sure in that area. But my question that I have for you, Minister, is on the ISIP, or Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program. Now, I was looking on the statements of operations, page 152, that it talks about, it shows that there's a budgeted amount under 2023-24, and then a forecasted amount. The budgeted amount is 430 million, and then the forecasted amount is 336 million. But, so I guess one of my questions is, why has it gone down? And then it shows an estimate of a 3-year estimate going forward, up to 668 million. Now, from what I had heard, that they had not determined whether ISIP is actually going to continue on. And so has the federal government, or are you expecting that the federal government will be bringing forward a new, or whatever the ISIP is going to be called in the future, and that it will be fully funded by 26-27?
Yeah, great question. And first off, I'd like to throw the thank you back at you for your advocacy and your work on Highway 3 and your work on the agri-food corridor down in Southern Alberta. I know we served in opposition together. We've been at this for a long time, and to finally see Highway 3 twinning happening, I know in your neck of the woods, there are lots of people thought that day would never come. So to see the Taber to Burdett, that first segment of the 8th segment, Highway 3 twinning, to see that construction start this spring is going to be pretty historic and pretty memorable. So I just wanted to thank you for your advocacy on that. But when it comes to ISIP, we'll see what happens with the federal budget coming up in April. I had mentioned the public transit fund, that $3 billion over 11 years, as well as the National Trade Corridor Fund, the $4.6 billion over 11 years. Those are 2 big programs that are coming to an end. And we're somehow getting mixed messages from folks in the NDP Liberal government on what exactly will be the new ISIP, or what will be the new public transit fund, or what will be the National Trade Corridor Fund going forward. So we're obviously building Alberta. We're doing what we can do to make sure that our provincial highway networks and our economic corridors are being built. But obviously having some of the funds that we transfer to Ottawa back to Alberta would be nice. But we'll see what happens in this upcoming federal budget. But we've lost there before, so we'll see how that goes.
Thank you, Minister. And Mr. Chair, I'd like to cede my time to Emily Dick.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Minister. Minister, my question just comes As you know, I'm the MLA for Grand Prairie, and south of Grand Prairie, we have significant resource revenues just coming from down there. We see incredible energy, obviously forestry, but we also have the Greenview Industrial Gateway just ramping up and industrial land being developed just a few minutes south. I know you mentioned the resource revenues map, which I'm excited to see, but because of the resource revenues and the opportunity for some more potential industrial gateway, I think we're going to see a potential rise in revenue from our area, but as well, in the capital plan, I see 24 million this year for the twinning of Highway 40 south of Grand Prairie, which I'm thankful for. But I don't see a specific line item for Highway 40X, the bypass around Grand Prairie. This is significant as most of the, if not all, the heavy traffic goes directly through our city. I believe it's about 28,000 vehicles go through Grand Prairie, including about 3,000 heavy trucks navigating residential, some school zones, and pedestrians. So, Minister, can you speak on the importance of both Highway 40 and the Highway 40X bypass, both to industry and to Grand Prairie residents? And also share whether design funding for Highway 40X, the bypass, are contained within this budget.
No, great questions, and yeah, another major economic corridor, Grand Prairie area, similar to the industrial heartland, similar to Highway 3 down in southern Alberta on the agri-food corridor. So very important economic region for the province. And when you look at the Highway 40 improvements in twinning, just in prior years, have been about $140 million in funding to date. But this budget actually has 60 million forecasted forecasted, but also for the estimate for this year, 24 million and 3.7 million to finish off that Highway 40 project. And as you mentioned, so for a total of 27.7 million within the 3-year capital plan to extend from Highway 40 south of Grand Prairie. But yes, as you mentioned, the Highway 40X, essentially for those that don't know the Grand Prairie region well, it essentially will create a ring road around Grand Prairie, so truck traffic, especially heavy truck traffic, is not having to go right through downtown Grand Prairie anymore. It'll be able to do a safe ring road around the southwest part of Grand Prairie. And budget 24 actually has engineering dollars committed as well. So there'll be $14 million in engineering for Highway 40X. And I think we're close on the land purchasing to be completed as well, needed to make that ring road. So that's obviously another important project, 40 and 40X. And I would say with great advocates for you and your other colleague up in Grand Prairie, you guys have been great champions of that project, because I think you guys understand not just the economic benefits to the province, but also the safety for people that live and enjoy that area. It's important to make sure that 40 and 40X are built.
Awesome. Thank you so very much, Minister. Really appreciate that. I'm looking forward to seeing that the design of that highway bypass getting complete. I'm going to cede the rest of my time to Member McDougall.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you very much for coming and for the work that you're doing, very good work that you're doing. It's a lot of projects that are in your bailiwick that relate to Calgary, and so with the time remaining, I'll try to talk to some of them. First of all, you talked briefly about the rail study, the 15-year rail study, and I'm just trying to understand. So there's a connection study that is underway. There's been some talk about a pinch point study. Is that pinch point study part of the overall longer-term planning structure? How does that fit into the thing? I guess if you will allow yourself to guess, I guess, or estimate what you think will be the time frame for when decisions might be made as to whether or not any of the rail projects that come from Calgary, that being the Calgary Edmonton or the Calgary Banff projects, might be in a position to be decided to go forward or not.
No, great questions. And actually, so this budget has the master rail plan strategy attached to it, the $15 million of detailed engineering study for for the overarching umbrella view of rail for the province. But previous budget, the budget before this, had the airport rail connection study committed. I believe it was 1.5 million for that study. And so that work's already been underway with the Calgary Airport as well as the city of Calgary. But the beauty or the logic behind the master rail plan is to make sure that everything fits together, that our LRT systems in Edmonton and Calgary fit within a broader possible commuter rail system, Edmonton and Calgary passenger rail system, as well as a potential Calgary to Banff passenger rail system. So the thought process behind all of it is how can we make sure that obviously rail lines connect to each other is the main reason, but how they can all work together and even have ridership and feasibility studies to show does it actually make sense at the end of the day, or do we need kind of a greater population centers to be able to have a profitable or at least break-even type rail network. So there's 2 years to do these engineering studies, and that's the 9 million year one, 6 million in year two, to make the 15 million. And then after that, we'll see what the studies say. If it's actually viable to have private sector components to be able to build some of these passenger rails, the province be able to step in on connecting the LRTs to a commuter rail system in and around Calgary and Edmonton. That's a big visionary project, and would probably take about a decade of construction. And as I mentioned before, 4-year shelf life for governments to talk decade-plus projects is a rarity, but it is a great vision from Premier Smith to see the benefit of rail and what the possibilities are here in Alberta.
Thank you for that. Deerfoot Trail, you spent $156 million this year, 523 over 3 years. Can you what is exactly we're going to accomplish from this? And I'm thinking specifically, for example, there's bottlenecks between Southland Drive and Bow Bottom Trail that affects my constituency to a great degree, but of course, Deerfoot Trail, a very busy and congested expressway at this point in time. By the end of this investment, what exactly would you see as being the improvement or the change that we can expect?
Yeah, I'm going to stop doing the favorite MLA thing, but when you look at the Calgary investments, they are quite significant. Deerfoot Trail upgrades, $523 million. To finish off the Calgary Ring Road, $120 million. We also have the Calgary Rivers District and Event Center, $237 million over 3 years. So significant investments in the Calgary area. But on Deerfoot Trail specifically, it is a mix of a design build and designed build delivery models. And so at 64th Avenue, there's the widening of the northbound lanes of Deerfoot. On 11th Street, there's an improved connection at 11th Street and the main line widening from Beddington Trail to the Airport Trail, and that should be completed this year. As well as McKnight Boulevard interchange, the improvement to the interchange and the main line widening from Beddington Trail to 32nd Avenue, also to be completed this year. And also Memorial Drive, the main line widening from 32nd Ave to Memorial Drive and 16th Avenue ramp modifications to be completed in 2025. So significant Deerfoot Trail improvements, and just for the benefit of the committee, we obviously with our 64,000 lane kilometers that we have in our provincial highway network, that also includes the 101 kilometers for the Calgary Ring Road, the Edmonton Ring Road, but also the Deerfoot in Calgary. So it's a provincial owned road. And so that is something that these improvements are obviously improving the asset that the province has along Deerfoot, but also making traffic a lot better for Calgarians in their daily commutes.
Thank you. Seeing I only have 40-some seconds left, on LRT, you have some funding going for both the Blue Line and the Green Line. I guess, what do we think we're going to accomplish on the Blue Line by the end of this fiscal year and our next fiscal year? And, probably that's all we're going to have time for in this question.
Yeah, so Green Line, our commitment of $1.5 billion is something that we're always going to stand beside and behind. And it is something that it is a City of Calgary project, so as they are working on scope to try to figure out what funding they can have, it is those provincial, that 1.5 billion is coming from the province. The federal government over a decade ago committed their 1.5 billion dollars, so as funders from the federal provincial government, that will continue.
Thank you very much. That concludes the government member's first block of questions. We now move to the second round of questions and responses. The speaking rotation going forward will remain the same as the first round, starting with the official opposition, followed by the independent member, and then government caucus. I'm going to assume shared time, so that'll be a 10-minute talking back and forth. No one can talk for more than 5 minutes straight at a time, and you won't be able to cede your time to another member. So with that, I'll ask the opposition to carry on with 10 minutes.
Thank you very much,
of shared
Mr.
time.
Chair. In the interest of time, I'm going to try to shorten up my questions so that the minister can get himself on the record, so that stakeholders who are listening will hear his response. And so I'll start first with something that is really a public safety issue, but I'm referring to estimates lines 4.3, salt, sand, gravel inventory acquisition. And I refer to something that's missing from that inventory acquisition, and it is the brine solution that are being applied to roads in Alberta already. I'm wondering, I'm talking about salt brine solutions that are being supplied to ring road maintenance contractors and also being bought by municipalities and counties to apply as an anti-icing agent to their roads. We are proud to claim that Alberta is rat-free. Why can we not aim for ice-free Alberta highways by adopting a widespread use of the anti-icing brine solutions? Two suppliers in this province prominently supply it, Tiger Calcium and Luger, and using proprietary solutions. It seems to work very well, and it saves lives. And I'm wondering why the province has not adopted it as in a widespread way as a part of a modern arsenal to prevent icy roads from developing in the first place.
Proud that Alberta is rat-free, but Alberta to be ice-free, I think we need the benefits of global warming to hit that, because at -12, that's when that type of solution doesn't work. The efficacy of it and the studies that we've shown just don't work. So that's why we do use sand, so to make sure that you have that traction on snow and ice. So obviously, if you can imagine in a blizzard, to be able to put down even heavier sand, which obviously for anybody with a rock chip, you've probably got one from that. But just the physical properties of sand to make sure that we have traction on our roads when we need it, so that there is safe traction for in icy and winter conditions. So that's something that we do on an annual basis, is monitor that to make sure that it's being applied appropriately. But when it comes to that brine solution, unfortunately, -12 is just a bad freezing property, and we obviously get colder than -12.
Thank you. Through the chair, I hate to contradict the minister, but the stakeholders would, I think, disagree with you wildly on this -12 assumption. I think it's incumbent upon the minister to take another real close look at the studies and the recent performance of these brine solutions. They're being used on the Henday by all three contractors, and there is data available, I believe, that the minister might want to look at that shows the performance rating of these contractors and their ability to keep highways clear of ice. And given that this brine solution is available in large reservoirs here in Alberta, and potentially sugar beet additives to reduce corrosion could possibly be sourced in Alberta. They're being trucked in from the United States right now by both by at least one of these contractors. There's a good economic development opportunity here to source this brine, as well as the anti-corrosive agents in Alberta. And I really would ask the minister to take a serious second look at anti-icing solutions as a problem, because we all know people who've died in icy highways. Former MLA Manmeet Buller, of course, was a victim of icy roads, and constituent of mine, Sanagani, driving back from her teaching position in Cadott Lake. Everybody knows somebody. So seriously, Minister, through the chair, I would ask that you take a real second look at these brine solution alternatives. Check the data and see if you can be updated and perhaps reassured that they have a wider operating temperature range that you may believe they now are able to be effective in. So I'll leave that topic for now, but please revisit that issue. And I wanted to turn to the question of rural bus networks. Now, 2018, you saw the demise of Greyhound, and it does not appear as though the minister is interested in provincial support for reestablishing a rural bus network, regular scheduled rural buses, or at least finding out what business model might work to reestablish this. This is an economic lifeline to small communities, economic development in rural Alberta, and it's something that the minister doesn't seem to be paying a lot of attention to. Yet you talk to people at RMA and at Alberta municipalities, and you ask them if they have a bus, and they say no. I mean, communities as big as Camrose, Wetaskiwin are without rural bus transportation, and on a number of fronts, it's necessary to their survival, and it's also a parcel delivery. It's economic development. So, is your ministry interested in finding ways that the provincial government can play a role to support the reestablishment of a rural bus transportation network in Alberta and interconnected across the province, across the country?
Just, if I could, Mr. Chair, just on his last point on freezing rain and anti-icing solutions. Freezing rain around that, I'm not a weatherman, but around 0 to that -10, that's anti-icing agents can be applied and have been used, and that freezing rain of, just right at the freezing mark. So they can be, depending on the weather, they can be useful. But we are, in our technical service branch, are always looking at new innovative ways of how we can maintain our roads, build our roads, and in a more timely and efficient and effective manner. But on, for your pilot, I knew.
Will you commit to meeting with the stakeholders who are involved in supplying anti-icing brine already?
Not relevant. The 23B, it's not part of the estimates. Meeting with stakeholders.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The minister was providing an answer to the question, so I think that he should be allowed to continue this line of questioning. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the point of order. It's, again, if you can point to a place in the thing that comes up, I would ask you to do that. But if you're willing to answer it, then that's fine too.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The whole topic of the anti-icing questions that I was referring to all dealt with the supply of product that I referenced already, and it wasn't included in that purchase list. So I've already referenced the appropriate section of the budget. So I just had simply asked in response to the minister if he would agree to follow-up meetings to talk with the stakeholders. So anyway, let's leave that topic, Mr. Chair, and now talk about rural buses and ask again, what interest does the ministry have in trying to determine a business model and assistance in reestablishing a rural bus network in Alberta?
So the member asked me at last estimates this exact same question, and I'll try to give the exact same answer from last year. We actually have about a dozen private sector bus lines that operate here in Alberta from Pacific Western Transportation.
They're nowhere near a network, Mr. Minister. There's not anywhere near adequate, and so.
Could you allow the minister to answer?
Sure, go ahead.
As I was saying, there's about a dozen bus lines that actually operate in the province of Alberta in rural areas. That's Pacific Western Transportation, Red Arrow, Cold Shot, J&L Shuttle, Northern Express, Sundog, Prairie Sprinter, Rider Express, Rimbey Express, Bashaw Bus Society, Brewster Express, and the Banff Airport are focused on Alberta's rural area. So I think there is, private sector that's already providing this service, and there was a pilot, actually, I think it was initiated back in 2018, that looked at rural transportation and a busing network, and that's something that we've reviewed and looked at. but with the private sector industries that are already out there, providing that bus service is something that's, I think they do a great job. And it's something that happy to meet with those bus line operators.
Thank you, to the chair, Mr. Minister, for that answer. So once again, you're relying upon the private sector to supply Alberta with the needed transportation in rural Alberta. And my response to you, sir, with respect, it is not working. It's absolutely inadequate, and there is a role for the provincial government, in my view, to play in determining what business model might work, because it needs provincial leadership, which your ministry is failing to provide. And rural Alberta is waiting for leadership on this issue with respect to rural bus transportation. And believe me, you're going to hear from me about it this year and next year on an ongoing basis until something happens.
Chair, this is not part of the estimates. Can we stick to the paper, please? That's on 23B.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You've been, we deal with the points of order as they arise, Member McDougall, as you know. You've been very generous in granting members wide latitude in using their time here at estimates. We've had similar sorts of discussions at previous meetings that you've allowed. I can't see any reason to change the direction now. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I think it's been answered, and we'll go with that. So thank you very much. Okay, we'll go to the independent. Did you have another? You're good? Okay. We'll go to government caucus for the rest of the meeting here. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Minister. Just wanted to let you know that when I'm done my question, I'm going to be very excited to allow you the opportunity to finish answering my question, which might be the first of the day, considering how it's been going so far. But I will commit to not interrupting you halfway through one of your fulsome answers, which I appreciate. Just want to take a quick pivot here to the wildfire impacts, and specifically your very long title of Transportation and Economic Corridors. And if I was to add another word to it, I might add safety corridors, just because that's what I believe when we're talking about wildfires, that is so important to an area like mine. In 2011, I've said this before, my hometown of Slave Lake, including my brother-in-law and some other family and friends, half of the town burned, as most of the people know. I was trapped inside of the southeast, where there was only one route out of the small neighborhood. So this past summer, when, just as an example, East Prairie Métis Settlement, which is in my riding, lost 40 homes, I believe, were destroyed. And it highlighted the firsthand struggles, I think, of the families displaced, and the trauma of not knowing if you're going to, not only your house will be there when you return, but if you'll be able to get out of the area safely. I'm very proud that our government did step up with a $9 million spend to make sure these people all had homes to return to. However, Minister, this tragedy demonstrates the importance of having multiple access routes and corridors to our smaller communities. So my first question, and I have a brief follow-up if there's time, would be, can you please speak to some of the investments that you're making in Budget 2024 to improve highway and road access to some of the smaller communities in northern Alberta, and maybe highlighting the importance of these, not just the economic corridors, but what I would call safety corridors? Thank you.
No, thank you, to you, Mr. Chair. The MLA is absolutely right. There are so many, especially northern communities, First Nations and the like, that have one main access in and out of those communities. And so to have an alternate safety route is something that we do look at as well. And specific projects like Highway 686, which is essentially be a new 200-plus kilometer road from Fort McMurray down to Peerless Trout Lake, and the 3 First Nations that live along that route, to be able to have additional alternate safety routes in case of a wildfire is obviously a main priority. And just of last year's wildfire season, Fox Lake, they have one access crossing a river, and their homes got damaged. And so working with Fox Lake access, or for them to gain access and to be able to barge across equipment and to rebuild that community is something that we've done. through transportation economic corridors. Obviously, we were hoping the federal government would step up. They haven't yet. But that is something that, whether it's rebuilding communities or making sure that there's alternate safety routes in and out of those communities is very important. So you're absolutely right, and it's something that we need to identify them and make sure that we can work with communities so we can build out that infrastructure. So you're absolutely right, Emily Sinclair.
Thank you, Minister. And just finally, if you under a key objective 1.3, your minister is collaborating with Indigenous communities to identify and advance infrastructure projects across the province, one of which you just mentioned. I was just wondering if you might be able to identify any of the other projects that we either have already announced, such as the 686, or anything else coming down the pipeline as an early Easter Bunny gift to some of my people in my riding.
Well, I know that the First Nations Water Tie-in Program has been a success and is a success. And there's 14 First Nations that $110 million grant has actually been allocated to. So you look at Budget 24 provides $37.7 million over 3 years to support First Nations connecting to existing regional water systems. So essentially that puts it right to the doorstep of the First Nation, and then obviously the federal government step in.
Apologize for the interruption, but I must advise the committee that the time allotted for consideration of the ministry's estimates has concluded. I'd like to remind committee members that we are scheduled to meet this evening at 7 p.m. to consider the estimates of the Ministry of Forestry and Parks. Thank you, everyone. This meeting is adjourned. Now,